Lovely to be here. It's lovely to see so many people who are interested in the state of our economy. The hashtag LabEcon16 is the second highest trending item on Twitter right now. Right after. But I did see a tweet by a woman who clicked on the hashtag and said, "Oh, I thought this was a discussion about Labradors. I must make Unfortunately for her, I will be talking about the economy. In my opening 5 minutes, I just want to focus on one issue and 3 policy suggestions to see what we can do about it. Because I love the idea that we're going to put forward new ways of thinking about how to improve our economy. Whoa, that was very strong. So the issue that I want us to focus on is, I think, the only issue that matters in economics, which is your income. So we see a lot of discussion about how the gross domestic product, GDP, has improved, but it was only very recently that per capita GDP, so average incomes, had recovered to pre-banking crisis levels. So just think about that. That was 8 years ago. So not only have you had 8 years of lost growth, you've just only recovered to the state that you were at, the average person in 2008. And I think that is the biggest challenge. Why is it that incomes are so stagnant? So I'm going to focus on 3 things and have 3 policy suggestions behind it, which I look forward to hearing your thoughts on. So 1 is obviously wages. Why are wages so low? 2 is jobs. And then 3 is what I consider to be the quality of your work. It's not just having a job, it's the quality of that job. And in fact, one of the anecdotes I remember most, Len mentioned Clinton there for a moment. President Clinton, the first President Clinton, said, in a speech, he had made a speech that said, "I've created so many jobs since I've been in office." And a woman in the audience, this was a public lecture, raised her hand and said, "Yes, Mr. President, I know you've created so many jobs, and I hold 3 of them, and I still do." And to me, that's how to be the. So the first thing to say about why are wages so low, I'm not going to kid you. It's a very complicated question. There's lots of factors involved. Trade unions is one of them. The share of your output that goes to workers versus capital is another issue. That share has been shrinking. So there are many issues around it. But one of the issues is investment. So a worker cannot be more productive in his or her job unless the company invests in the capital, in the machinery, in the human capital, in the support given to that person to make that person more productive. So the question has to be, investment has fallen by so much since the crisis that has to be an issue we look at going forward. So the question is, what can we do about it? And the scale of the wage problem is significant. Real wages have fallen by about 10% since the banking crisis. That is unprecedented. We've all seen our wages on average fall by about a 10th. We haven't seen that since the Great Depression. So in order to raise investment in this context, I think has to be an absolutely urgent matter. There's a private sector role, there's also a governmental role. So you can, for instance, right now, borrow for 10 years as the British government for just over 1%. For 30 years for just over 2%, nominal gilt yield minus inflation. I mean, think about it. If I could borrow at that rate, that would be amazing. For government to pass up that opportunity, I think, is something we really need to think about. And you can be fiscally responsible and still borrow to invest in growth. The OECD estimates that if we invest the equivalent of 1% of GDP, it would actually cut our debt by something like 0.5% of GDP. So those 2 things are not contradictory. And government, I think, can do more on that front, including encouraging private investment. It's what we economists call crowding in. Government does better on hard and soft infrastructure, then that means private investment is more productive. And looking at small businesses in particular, that would be a huge help. The second issue is jobs that I mentioned. You need to have jobs that are coming from a sector which is a sustainable growth driver. So rebalancing, I know, has already been talked about before. So this is my suggestion on this front. If we give an implicit government guarantee to banks, because they are a crucial part of the economy, why can't we give an implicit government guarantee to key industries that underpin our growth? And I think you know the industry that I'm thinking about. For instance, car industry is one of the strongest in Britain. Without the steel industry as an input, that would actually be an issue. So, and I wouldn't look at this issue in terms of rebalancing, obviously in black and white terms, but I think there is something to be said for putting your policies behind a more balanced set of growth engines. And these days, most categorizations are not easy to make. Man-use services, lots of manufacturing companies do high-end services. Services companies need support. They also are part of the manufacturing sector. So I think it's about having a sensible policy that supports the key industries along whichever spectrum to rebalance the economy away from being reliant too much on one sector. And then finally, I only have 5 minutes, I know I'm probably run out of time, which is to say the quality that I described is in terms of the jobs, but it's also in terms of our working environment. So cities, housing, transport, all of those things I think matter a lot. And in terms of this area, I like the idea of decentralization, allowing cities to have greater autonomy and experiment and work out what works. So in the United States, you see this a lot. A welfare policy that's trialed in Minnesota, if it doesn't work, don't roll it out in another state. Allow them to experiment, to work out what works best for their locality, and then take the best lessons from that. And in fact, an economy I look at a lot, which is China, which has lots of challenges, but when it started to reform, it experimented a lot with localities. And I think there's something to be said there. But also beware, they can be quite competitive cities, and that's actually not a bad thing. It's good to have a bit of competition and see which city can deliver. So let me just finish by saying, I think there is an absolute need for fresh thinking on economics and economic policy. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm glad all of you are here. And I'm just going to finish with a quote by an economist, Arthur Marshall, who said, "The function of government is to govern as little as possible, but not to do as little as possible." Thank you.